Welcome to NAB Show New York. Welcome to the NAB Show New York Tech Chat Theater. I'm Christina Clapp. I'm joined by Glen Sakata. Glen is the General Manager, West Coast USA at Dalet. And our session today is when the streaming media supply chain no longer fits. What now? So, Glen has had over 3 decades of product market and sales development experience across the media and entertainment industry, working with studios, broadcasters, MVPDs, and digital platforms. Glen has an extensive track record of launching transformative technologies from studio robotics, master control automation, video processing, statistical multiplexing, and media logistics solutions to meet the constantly evolving business challenge. So, Glen Sakata, as you're joining us today to talk about asset management, the changes it's undergone in the past 3 years, where we are now, and what work there still is to do. Probably everyone here is familiar with the concept of media asset management, MAM, but Glen, can you lay out for us the progression of MAM from before COVID to today?
Thanks, Christine. Really appreciate being here today. And all those explanations about where I've been is why I have the gray hair that I've got. So, yeah, it's over the last 3 years, it's been quite the journey across media asset management because it touches everything in the industry. So, starting from the top, it's kind of interesting because in most cases, when you talk to ourselves or any other media asset management company, you get these types of diagrams that's behind me. Very simplified, they're very well thought out, and everything looks great and simple and orderly. The reality is, it's not really like that at all. It looks more like this, because the complications in any given system, whether it's a simple small post-production house or a major multinational organization, it's a very complex equation. It has much to do with the infrastructure and the ecosystem, but also to do with the production companies themselves. How do you want your content processed and where is it going? So when you look at that type of equation, you see the complexity that you could be running into. It does kind of harken back to what are these elements. So the first thing you get is, hey, here's what the MAM company is proposing. Nice, simple block diagrams, everybody understands them. The reality is this is what it looks like when it's actually implemented. And everybody's the same. I mean, because the problem is, it's a problem. And the more you grow and the more you evolve your business, the more things have to change. So media asset management over the last year really accelerated, in part because of COVID. People had to do things that they didn't traditionally want to do, or let's say had the appetite to do. So they launched remote editing platforms. They launched a lot of cloud processes. They had much higher take rates in AWS and GCP. So the world really did change, and people were willing to work with whatever they could during that time. But now we're facing a different part of the equation, which is, what do you do next? Those complications that people had and they were willing to do, now they're going back and, okay, how do we scale this? And how do we keep that scale going at a cost-effective manner? But not only that, but what we did over the last 12, 24 months, well, our InfoSec people didn't quite like what we were doing, but they looked the other way and let us do it. We also seen people realize that when you've got a 24/7 operation per se, you really can't afford any downtime. So your platform, whatever your platform is, has to stay up and running 24/7 by 365. So there is no, gee, we're going to go down for maintenance for next weekend, because there is no next weekend. The big difference was that the delivery endpoints that most of our customers had over the years, linear and VOD deliveries, that was difficult enough to do. But what we saw in the United States is more and more US content being used overseas. So localization became a massive issue. The other things that were tried but not really implemented in a big way was things like AI. So AI on day one, it's speech to text, other fundamental elements that you could do. But now people are looking at AI and say, well, wait a second, why can't we do 24/7 auto QC? Why can't we do editorial, in the cloud using AI? And our answer is you can, but the complexities of those workflows, the thought that has to go into it, has you want to take a step back into your own environment. So the recommendation we have for all of our customers is the same, which is it's not just about the technology stack that we're providing, but take that step back and look at what does your business really look like today. And it's surprising how many companies, and there are some major players out there, who are just now starting to look at themselves in the mirror and say, wait, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to repurpose our content? How do we grow this in a way that continues on the path that we've been on, but in a much greater and expanded way? So some of the items that are up on that screen indicate the gaps that exist. I mentioned earlier about InfoSec. If you talk to any MAM organization out there, the pains around InfoSec are not insignificant. And to overcome those hurdles, you can't go crawl into a shell. You've got to have open dialogues with your vendors. You have to have open dialogues with your IT staff. But you have to bring in people from the outside too to help make sure they're analyzing the business correctly. Don't do what you did the last 10 years because you did it for 10 years. We don't care. You don't care. And your customers don't care. You really need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, where are we going? How do we get there? The last part is why do all this? And some people are familiar with David McCrory's perspective back in 2010 when he worked for VMware, and it's called data gravity, which is the more data collects, the larger the data set gets, the more there's a tendency for that gravity to pull in the applications and also the latency issues when you've got certain types of volumes that you're not used to working with. Probably our largest archive customer today is a major Hollywood studio that currently has 700 million assets. So 700 million assets, and our qualification is you have to be able to search for anything in 250 milliseconds. It's not insignificant, but everybody is going to have the same problem. So what we're seeing is people who start out small and they want to grow. It's great, get your feet wet, but once you start out, you'll find that your libraries keep growing, the way you repurpose that content keeps changing, those challenges will evolve. So what you start out with on day one isn't necessarily what you're going to end up with on day 365. But the concept of data gravity is such that there's a tendency for everything to get put into one vertical stack. And if you look back in broadcast history, you remember things like Ampex, RCA, Sony. I'm not making jabs at Sony, they're still around. But when you look at the way the world has evolved, that vertical stack is kind of natural, but it's also natural to also try to get away from, because now you're stuck with one thing, doing everything. And if you do that today in today's marketplace, that's going to be really problematic. So again, from our perspective is look at your business, start from ground zero, bring in a qualified integrator partner to analyze your business and help you understand where you are and where you really could be going. And you bring in people like us to help you evaluate, okay, what do those workflows look like? How do they progress? But also, how do we evolve it? The most interesting thing we have from our customers is not so much how the workflow gets done, but how you do the exception handling. When something breaks, what happens? You can run around with your hair on fire, but that's not going to help much. But in the end, it's all about growth and expansion, especially on your delivery endpoints. What you delivered to 10 years ago is a fraction of what you're delivering to today, and it'll be a fraction of what you deliver to tomorrow.
Amazing.
Do you have any questions? You look like you have those questions.
Are there resources on the Dalet site that folks can access?
Absolutely.
If they want? Okay.
There's also the Dalet booth here, obviously. You're welcome to come by. We're only 50 feet away. Great. But there's everything is available on the website, and we're always happy to have those conversations. And we also work through integrator partners who are also happy to bring us in and have those in-depth conversations on how to solve your problems of today and your problems of tomorrow.
Tomorrow, beautiful. Thank you. Glenn, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the show, and we will see you in another 5 minutes.